Greetings, BookTube. It's Poetry Thursday.
I like to read. You do too. Let's get ridiculous.
Okay, today's piece is called Interview, and it is an assemblage, a collage, if you will, of Frost and Stevens poetry. This one was published in, I want to say, Red Hawk Review? No, Raven Chronicles. This one was published in Raven Chronicles, probably in the 90s. I remember being extra proud of it because Joy Harjo was on their editorial board for poetry there. So I had a dream that she might have read my poem because she's one of my favorite poets. So it says, Interview. We are privileged to reproduce here a document recently found in the archives of the Surety Claims Department of Hartford Accident and Indemnity. Caseworker Wallace S., Special Consult to Vermont Region. Case number 47356998. Client Frost, Robert. WS, that's going to be Wallace Stevens, right? WS, in order to insure your farm and person, sir, I shall be obliged to ask you a number of questions. RF for Robert Frost, shoot. WS, why should she give her bounty to the dead? RF, nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. WS, but when the birds are gone, and their warm fields return no more, where then is paradise? For them there was really, FS, for them there was really nothing sad. But though they rejoiced in the nest they kept, one had to be versed in country things, not to believe the Phoebes wept. WS, why do you imagine golden birds? RF, in spring more mortal singers than belong to any one place cover us with song. Thrush, bluebird, blackbird, sparrow, and robin throng. Some to go further north to Hudson's Bay, some that have come too far north, back away. Really a very few to build and stay. Now we see how they liked belated snow, the fields that had nowhere left for them to go. WS, what were the hymns that buzzed beneath my ears? RF, waspish, on glassy wires artistically bent. He draws himself up to his full extent. His natty wings with self-assurance perk. His stinging quarters menacingly work. Poor egoist, he has no way of knowing, but he's as good as anybody's going. WS, and why the poet as eternal chef d'orchestra? RF, when the wind works against us in the dark and pelts with snow the lower chamber window on the east, and whispers with a sort of stifled bark, the beast, come out, it costs no inward struggle not to go, ah no, I count our strength. WS, what good divinity if it can come only in silent shadows and dreams? RF, but glad with him I worked as with his aid, and wary, sought at noon with him the shade, and dreaming as it were, held brotherly speech with one whose thought I had not hoped to reach. Men work together, I told him from the heart, whether they work together or apart. WS, is there no change of death in paradise? Does ripe fruit never fall? RF, you ought to have seen what I saw on my way to the village through Patterson's pasture today. Blueberries as big as the end of your thumb, real sky blue and heavy, and ready to drum in the cavernous pail of the first one to come. And all ripe together, not some of them green and some of them ripe. You ought to have seen. WS, I don't know what part of the pasture you mean. RF, my long two-pointed ladder sticking through a tree toward heaven still, and there's a barrel that I didn't fill beside it, and there may be 2 or 3 apples I didn't pick upon some bough, but I am done with apple picking now. Essence of winter sleep is on the night, the scent of apples I am drowsing off. WS, what syllable are you seeking, vocalissimus, in the distances of sleep? RF, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. WS, do I press the extremist book of the wisest man close to me, hidden in me day and night? RF, the middleness of the road. It seems to go into a wood, the place of standing still as long as the trees have stood, but say what fancy will, but have almost nothing to do with the absolute flight and rest the universal blue and local green suggest. WS, who comes and goes all day? May there be an ennui of the first idea? What else, prodigious scholar, should there be? RF, trial by existence. 'Tis of the essence of life here, though we choose greatly, still to lack the lasting memory of all clear. That life has for us on the rack nothing but what was somehow chose. Thus are we wholly stripped of pride in the plane that has but one close, bearing it crushed and mystified. WS, was the sun concoct for angels or for men? RF, two roads diverged in wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. WS, thank you, Mr. Frost. We will be in touch. Recommendation, deny coverage. Overturned, claim filed and paid, 1963. What I love about this piece is that when I was very young, when I went into my PhD program, pretty much straight from college, very idealistic, and I did literature, and I felt that the humanities needed to be moving in their own creative direction and stretching the field so that the social sciences stuck in the middle would not be constantly being dragged towards the more analytical sciences, and we would create a space for more movement and, of course, more humanities, less of knowing how to build bombs and more of knowing why not to build bombs, why versus how, that sort of thing. So one of my ideas was that we could do literary criticism by putting authors in conversation with each other, basically writing these kinds of dialogues. I was going to start with Flaubert. Sartre wrote a literary analysis of Flaubert called The Family Idiot. I thought, wouldn't it be fun to put Flaubert in conversation with Sartre about that work? Of course, we know what Sartre thought of Flaubert, but what would Flaubert make with his, 19th century mindset, make of some of these ideas of Sartre's? And of course, it was demanding. You would have to really get into deep knowledge of the author, how Flaubert would actually speak. This sort of thing would be harder with the classic authors, but I, for that reason, wanted to start at least back in the 19th century. Anyway, none of my professors had any belief in this program whatsoever. I went to Rice, which was, I think, the second best program in the States at the time for French studies. What I was really wanting to do was Civilisation Française, which the French do, which is putting literature in relationship with music and art and history and philosophy and all the disciplines. But actually, in the case of Rice, and I think most French programs were really in thrall at that time to theory, which in a way was chasing again and pushing more towards that empirical side of things and not stretching out and creatively creating the humanities space that I wanted. So we had a difference of opinion. I didn't finish the PhD. And in the end, I never did that sort of literary criticism that I had wanted to do. But then I realized, just on a whim, I took a course of poetry years later in social work school. I had a free period, and I took modernist poetry, and so I wrote this piece for the professor. She liked it, and I sent it along, and I guess the magazine liked it. But I realized one day, I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I kind of did what I had wanted to do back in my PhD days in this piece. So I feel it's okay. I feel I completed my mission. I did this one little homage to my once grand vision for all of scholarship, and I'll have to be contented with that. So I hope you enjoyed it as well, and I'll see you next Poetry Thursday, if not before.